Today I'm going to read The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, which was published in 2003. Chapter 1. Robert Langdon awoke slowly. A telephone was ringing in the darkness, a tinny, unfamiliar ring. He fumbled for the bedside lamp and turned it on. Squinting at his surroundings, he saw a plush Renaissance bedroom with Louis XIV furniture, hand-frescoed walls, and a colossal mahogany four-poster bed. Where the hell am I? He thought. The jacquard bathroom hanging on his bedpost bore the monogram Hotel Ritz, Paris. Slowly the fog began to lift. Langdon picked up the receiver. Hello? Monsieur Langdon, a man's voice said. I hope I have not awoken you. Dazed, Langdon looked at the bedside clock. It was 12:32 a.m. He had been asleep only an hour, but he felt like the dead. This is the concierge, monsieur. I apologize for this intrusion, but you have a visitor. He insists it is urgent. Langdon still felt fuzzy. A visitor? His eyes focused now on a crumpled flyer on his bedside table. The American University of Paris proudly presents an evening with Robert Langdon, professor of religious symbology, Harvard University. Langdon groaned. Tonight's lecture, a slideshow about pagan symbolism hidden in the stones of the Chartres Cathedral, had probably ruffled some conservative feathers in the audience. Most likely, some religious scholar had trailed him home to pick a fight. I'm sorry, Langdon said, but I'm very tired and... My, monsieur, the concierge pressed, lowering his voice. Your guest is an important man. Langdon had little doubt. His books on religious paintings and cult symbology had made him a reluctant celebrity in the art world. And last year, Langdon's visibility had increased 100-fold after his involvement in a widely publicized incident at the Vatican. Since then, a stream of self-important historians and art buffs arriving at his door had seemed never-ending. If you would be so kind, Langdon said, doing his best to remain polite, could you take the man's name and number and tell him I'll try to call him before I leave Paris on Tuesday? Thank you. He hung up the phone before the concierge could protest. Sitting up now, Langdon frowned at his bedside guest relations handbook, whose cover boasted, Sleep like a baby in the City of Lights, slumber at the Paris Ritz. He turned and gazed tiredly into the full-length mirror across the room. The man staring back at him was a stranger, tousled and weary. You need a vacation, Robert. The past year had taken a heavy toll on him, but he didn't appreciate seeing proof in the mirror. His usually sharp blue eyes looked hazy and drawn tonight. A dark stubble was shrouding his strong jaw and dimpled chin. Around his temples, the gray highlights were advancing, making their way deeper into his thicket of coarse black hair. Although his female colleagues insisted the gray only accentuated his bookish appeal, Langdon knew better. If Boston Magazine could see me now. Last month, much to Langdon's embarrassment, Boston Magazine had listed him as one of that city's top 10 most intriguing people, a dubious honor that made him the brunt of endless ribbing by his Harvard colleagues. Tonight, 3,000 miles from home, the accolade had resurfaced to haunt him at the lecture he had given. Ladies and gentlemen, the hostess had announced to a full house at the American University of Paris's Pavillon Dauphine. Our guest tonight needs no introduction. He is the author of numerous books: The Symbology of Secret Sects, The Art of the Illuminati, Lost Language of Ideograms, and when I say he wrote the book on religious iconology, I mean that quite literally. Many of you use his textbook in class. The students in the crowd nodded enthusiastically. I had planned to introduce him tonight by sharing his curriculum vitae. However, she glanced playfully at Langdon, who was seated on stage. An audience member has just handed me a far more, shall we say, intriguing introduction. She held up a copy of Boston Magazine. Langdon cringed. Where the hell did she get that? The hostess began reading choice excerpts from the inane article, and Langdon felt himself sinking lower and lower in his chair. 30 seconds later, the crowd was grinning, and the woman showed no signs of letting up. And Mr. Langdon's refusal to speak publicly about his unusual role in last year's Vatican conclave certainly wins him points on our intrigometer. The hostess goaded the crowd. Would you like to hear more? The crowd applauded. Somebody stop her, Langdon pleaded as she dove into the article again. Although Professor Lang might not be considered hunk handsome like some of our younger awardees, this 40-something academic has more than his share of scholarly allure. His captivating presence is punctuated by an unusually low baritone speaking voice, which his female students describe as chocolate for the ears. The hall erupted in laughter. Langdon forced an awkward smile. He knew what came next. Some ridiculous line about Harrison Ford in Harris Tweed. And because this evening he had figured it was finally safe again to wear his Harris Tweed and Burberry turtleneck, he decided to take action. Thank you, Monique, Langdon said, standing prematurely and edging her away from the podium. Boston Magazine clearly has a gift for fiction. He turned to the audience with an embarrassed sigh. And if I find which one of you provided that article, I'll have the consulate deport you. The crowd laughed. Well, folks, as you all know, I'm here tonight to talk about the power of symbols. The ringing of Langdon's hotel phone once again broke the silence. Groaning in disbelief, he picked up. Yes? As expected, it was the concierge. Mr. Langdon, again my apologies. I am calling to inform you that your guest is now en route to your room. I thought I should alert you. Langdon was wide awake now. You sent someone to my room? I apologize, monsieur, but a man like this, I cannot presume the authority to stop him. Who exactly is he? But the concierge was gone. Almost immediately, a heavy fist pounded on Langdon's door. Uncertain, Langdon slid off the bed, feeling his toes sink deep into the carpet. He donned the hotel bathrobe and moved toward the door. Who is it? Mr. Langdon, I need to speak with you. The man's English was accented, a sharp, authoritative bark. My name is Lieutenant Jerome Collet, Direction Central Police Judiciaire. Langdon paused. The Judicial Police? The DCPJ was the rough equivalent to the United States FBI. Leaving the security chain in place, Langdon opened the door a few inches. The face staring back at him was thin and washed out. The man was exceptionally lean, dressed in an official-looking blue uniform. "May I come in?" the agent asked. Langdon hesitated, feeling uncertain as the stranger's sallow eyes studied him. "What is this all about?" "My capitaine requires your expertise in a private matter." "Now?" Langdon managed. "It's after midnight." "Am I correct that you were scheduled to meet with the curator of the Louvre this evening?" Langdon felt a sudden surge of uneasiness. He and the revered curator Jacques Saunière had been slated to meet for drinks after Langdon's lecture tonight, but Saunière had never shown up. "Yes, how did you know that?" "We found your name in his daily planner." "I trust nothing is wrong?" The agent gave a dire sigh and slid a Polaroid snapshot through the narrow opening in the door. When Langdon saw the photo, his entire body went rigid. This photo was taken less than an hour ago, inside the Louvre. As Langdon stared at the bizarre image, his initial revulsion and shock gave way to a sudden upwelling of anger. Who would do this? "We had hoped that you might be able to answer that very question, considering your knowledge in symbology and your plans to meet with him." Langdon stared at the picture, his horror now laced with fear. The agent checked his watch. "My Capitan is waiting, sir." Langdon barely heard him. "The symbol here, and the way his body is oddly positioned?" Langdon nodded, feeling a chill as he looked up. The agent looked grim. "You don't understand, Mr. Langdon. What you see in this photograph, Monsieur Saunière did that to himself." Chapter 2. 1 mile away, the hulking albino named Silas limped through the front gate of the luxurious brownstone residence on Rue La Bruyère. The spiked sickle belt that he wore around his thigh cut into his flesh, and yet his soul sang with the satisfaction of service to the Lord. Pain is good. His red eyes scanned the lobby as he entered the residence, empty. He climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to awaken any of his fellow numeraries. His bedroom door was open. Locks were forbidden here. He entered, closing the door behind him. The room was Spartan. Hardwood floors, a pine dresser, a canvas mat in the corner that served as his bed. He was a visitor here this week, and yet for many years he had been blessed with a similar sanctuary in New York City. The Lord has provided me shelter and purpose in my life. Tonight, at last, Silas felt he had begun to repay his debt. Hurrying to the dresser, he found the cell phone hidden in his bottom drawer and placed a call. "Yes?" a male voice answered. "Teacher, I have returned." "Speak," the voice commanded, sounding pleased to hear from him. "All 4 are gone. The 3 Seneschaux and the Grand Master himself." There was a momentary pause, as if for prayer. "Then I assume you have the information?" All 4 concurred independently. "And you believed them?" Their agreement was too great for coincidence. An excited breath. "Excellent! I had feared the Brotherhood's reputation for secrecy might prevail. The prospect of death is a strong motivation. So, my pupil, tell me what I must know." Silas knew the information he had gleaned from his victims would come as a shock. Teacher, all four confirmed the existence of the clef de voix, the legendary keystone. He heard a quick intake of breath over the phone and could feel the teacher's excitement. The keystone, exactly as we suspected. According to lore, the Brotherhood created a map of stone, a clef de voix, or keystone, an engraved tablet that revealed the final resting place of the Brotherhood's greatest secret. Information so powerful that its protection was the reason for the Brotherhood's very existence. When we possess the keystone, the teacher said, we will only be one step away. We are closer than you think. The keystone is here in Paris. Paris? Incredible. It is almost too easy. Silas relayed the earlier events of the evening, how all four of his victims, moments before death, had desperately tried to buy back their godless lives by telling their secret. Each had told Silas the exact same thing, that the keystone was ingeniously hidden at a precise location inside one of Paris's ancient churches, the Église de Saint-Sulpice. Inside a house of the Lord, the teacher exclaimed. How they mock us, as they have for centuries. The teacher fell silent, as if letting the triumph of this moment settle over him. Finally he spoke. You have done a great service to God. We have waited centuries for this. You must retrieve the stone for me immediately, tonight. You understand the stakes. Silas knew the stakes were incalculable, and yet what the teacher was now commanding seemed impossible. But the church, it is a fortress, especially at night. How will I enter? With the confident tone of a man of enormous influence, the teacher explained what was to be done. When Silas hung up the phone, his skin tingled with anticipation. 1 hour, he told himself, grateful that the teacher had given him time to carry out necessary penance before entering a house of God. I must purge my soul of today's sins. The sins committed today had been holy in purpose. Acts of war against the enemies of God had been committed for centuries. Forgiveness was assured. Even so, Silas knew, absolution required sacrifice. Pulling his shades, he knelt in the center of the room. Looking down, he examined the spiked belt clamped around his thigh. All true followers of the way wore this device, a leather strap studded with sharp metal barbs that cut into the flesh as a perpetual reminder of Christ's suffering. The pain caused by the device also helped counteract the desires of the flesh. Although Silas had already worn the belt today longer than the requisite 2 hours, he knew today was no ordinary day. Grasping at the buckle, he cinched it 1 notch tighter, wincing as the barbs dug into his flesh. Pain is good, Silas whispered, repeating the sacred mantra of Father Jose Maria Escrivá, the teacher of all teachers. Although Escrivá had died in 1975, his wisdom lived on. His words still whispered by thousands of faithful servants around the globe as they knelt on the floor and performed the sacred practice known as corporal mortification. Silas turned his attention to a heavy knotted rope coiled neatly on the floor beside him. The discipline. Silas said a quick prayer. Then, gripping one end of the rope, he closed his eyes and swung it hard over his shoulder, feeling the knot slap against his back. Chapter 3. The crisp April air whipped through the open window of the Citroën ZX as it skimmed south past the Opera House and crossed Place de Vendôme. In the passenger seat, Robert Langdon felt the city tear past him as he tried to clear his thoughts. His quick shower and shave had left him looking reasonably presentable, but had done little to ease his anxiety. The frightening image of the curator remained locked in his mind. Langdon could not help but feel a deep sense of loss at the curator's death. Despite Saunier's reputation for being reclusive, his recognition for dedication to the arts made him an easy man to revere. His book on the secret codes hidden in the paintings of Poussin and Teniers were some of Langdon's favorite classroom texts. Tonight's meeting had been one Langdon was very much looking forward to, and he was disappointed when the curator had not shown. Outside, the city was just now winding down. Street vendors wheeling carts of candied amandes, waiters carrying bags of garbage to the curb, a pair of late-night lovers cuddling to stay warm in a breeze scented with jasmine blossoms. The Citroën navigated the chaos with authority, its dissonant two-tone siren parting the traffic like a knife. "Le Capitaine was pleased to discover you were still in Paris tonight," the agent said, speaking for the first time since they left the hotel. "A fortunate coincidence." Langdon was feeling anything but fortunate, and coincidence was a concept he did not entirely trust. As someone who had spent his life exploring the hidden interconnectivity of disparate emblems and ideologies, Langdon viewed the world as a web of profoundly intertwined histories and events. The connections may be invisible. He often preached to his symbology classes at Harvard, but they are always there, buried just beneath the surface. "I assume," Langdon said, "that the American University of Paris told you where I was staying?" The driver shook his head. "Interpol." Interpol, Langdon thought, of course. He had forgotten that the seemingly innocuous request of all European hotels to see a passport at check-in was more than a quaint formality. It was the law. On any given night, all across Europe, Interpol officials could pinpoint exactly who was sleeping where. Finding Langdon at the Ritz had probably taken all of 5 seconds. As the Citroën accelerated southward across the city, the illuminated profile of the Eiffel Tower appeared, shooting skyward in the distance to the right. Seeing it, Langdon thought of Victoria, recalling their playful promise a year ago that every 6 months they would meet again at a different romantic spot on the globe. The Eiffel Tower, Langdon suspected, would have made their list. Sadly, he had last kissed Victoria in a noisy airport in Rome more than a year ago. "Did you mount her?" the agent asked, looking over. "I beg your pardon?" "She is lovely, no?" The agent motioned through the windshield towards the Eiffel Tower. "Have you mounted her?" Langdon rolled his eyes. No, I haven't climbed the tower. She is the symbol of France. I think she is perfect. When they reached the intersection at Rue de Rivoli, the traffic light was red, but the Citroën didn't slow. The agent gunned the sedan across the junction and sped onto a wooden section of Rue Castiglione, which served as the northern entrance to the famed Tuileries Gardens, Paris's own version of Central Park. Most tourists mistranslated Jardin des Tuileries as relating to the thousands of tulips that bloomed here, but Tuileries was actually a literal reference to something far less romantic. As they entered the deserted park, the agent reached under the dash and turned off the blaring siren. Langdon exhaled, savoring the sudden quiet. Outside the car, the pale wash of halogen headlights skimmed over the crushed gravel parkway, the rugged whir of the tires intoning a hypnotic rhythm. Langdon had always considered the Tuileries to be sacred ground. These were the gardens in which Claude Monet had experimented with form and color, and literally inspired the birth of the Impressionist movement. Tonight, however, this place held a strange aura of foreboding. The Citroën swerved left now, angling west down the park's central boulevard. Cutting around a circular pond, the driver cut across a desolate avenue out into a wide quadrangle beyond. Langdon could now see the end of the Tuileries Gardens, marked by a giant stone archway, Arc de Carousel. Despite the rituals once held at the Arc de Carousel, art aficionados revered this place for another reason entirely. From the esplanade at the end of the Tuileries, 4 of the finest art museums in the world could be seen, one at each point of the compass. Out the right-hand window, south across the Seine and the Quai Voltaire, Langdon could see the dramatically lit facade of the old train station, now the esteemed Musée d'Orsay. Glancing left, he could make out the top of the ultra-modern Pompidou Center, which housed the Museum of Modern Art. Behind him to the west, Langdon knew the ancient obelisk of Ramses rose above the trees, marking the Musée des Jeux de Paume. But it was straight ahead, to the east, through the archway, that Langdon could now see the monolithic Renaissance palace that had become the most famous art museum in the world, the Musée du Louvre. Langdon felt a familiar tinge of wonder as his eyes made a futile attempt to absorb the entire mass of the edifice. Across a staggeringly expansive plaza, the imposing facade of the Louvre rose like a citadel against the Paris sky. Shaped like an enormous horseshoe, the Louvre was the longest building in Europe, stretching farther than 3 Eiffel Towers laid end to end. Not even the 1,000,000 square feet of open plaza between the museum wings could challenge the majesty of the facade's breadth. Langdon had once walked the Louvre entire perimeter, an astonishing 3-mile journey. Despite the estimated 5 days it would take a visitor to properly appreciate the 65,300 pieces of art in this building, most tourists chose an abbreviated experience Langdon referred to as the Louvre Light, a full sprint through the museum to see the 3 most famous objects: the Mona Lisa, the Venus de Milo, and Winged Victory. Art Buchwald had once boasted he'd seen all 3 masterpieces in 5 minutes and 56 seconds. The driver pulled out a handheld walkie-talkie and spoke at rapid-fire French. Monsieur Langdon est arrivé, 2 minutes. An undecipherable confirmation came crackling back. The agent stowed the device, turning now to Langdon. You will meet the Capitaine at the main entrance. The driver ignored the signs prohibiting auto traffic on the plaza, revved the engine, and gunned the Citroën up over the curb. The Louvre's main entrance was visible now, rising boldly in the distance, encircled by 7 triangular pools from which spouted illuminated fountains. The new entrance to the Paris Louvre had become almost as famous as the museum itself. The controversial neo-modern glass pyramid, designed by Chinese-born American architect I.M. Pei, still evokes scorn from traditionalists who felt it destroyed the dignity of the Renaissance courtyard. Goethe had described architecture as frozen music, and Pei's critics described this pyramid as fingernails on a chalkboard. Progressive admirers, though, hailed Pei's 71-foot-tall, transparent pyramid as a dazzling synergy of ancient structure and modern method, a symbolic link between the old and new, helping usher the Louvre into the next millennium. Do you like our pyramid? The agent asked. Langdon frowned. The French, it seemed, loved to ask Americans this. It was a loaded question, of course. Admitting you liked the pyramid made you a tasteless American, and expressing dislike was an insult to the French. Mitterrand was a bold man, Langdon replied, splitting the difference. The late French president who had commissioned the pyramid was said to have suffered from a pharaoh complex, single-handedly responsible for filling Paris with Egyptian obelisks, art, and artifacts. Francois Mitterrand had an affinity for Egyptian culture that was so all-consuming that the French still referred to him as the Sphinx. What is the captain's name? Langdon asked, changing topics. Bézu Foch, the driver said, approaching the pyramid's main entrance. We call him Les Tarot. Langdon glanced over at him, wondering if every Frenchman had a mysterious animal epithet. You call your captain the Bull? The man arched his eyebrows. Your French is better than you admit, Monsieur Langdon. My French stinks, Langdon thought, but my zodiac iconography is pretty good. Taurus was always the bull. Astrology was a symbolic constant all over the world. The agent pulled the car to a stop and pointed between 2 fountains to a large door in the side of the pyramid. There is the entrance. Good luck, monsieur. You're not coming? My orders are to leave you here. I have other business to attend to. Langdon heaved a sigh and climbed out. It's your circus. The agent revved his engine and sped off. As Langdon stood alone and watched the departing tailgates, he realized he could easily reconsider, exit the courtyard, grab a taxi, and head home to bed. Something told him it was probably a lousy idea. As he moved toward the mist of the fountains, Langdon had the uneasy sense he was crossing an imaginary threshold into another world. The dreamlike quality of the evening was settling around him. 20 minutes ago he had been asleep in his hotel room. Now he was standing in front of a transparent pyramid built by the Sphinx, waiting for a policeman they called the Bull. I'm trapped in a Salvador Dali painting, he thought. Langdon strode to the main entrance, an enormous revolving door. The foyer beyond was dimly lit and deserted. Do I knock? Langdon wondered if any of Harvard's revered Egyptologists had ever knocked on the front door of a pyramid and expected an answer. He raised his hand to bang on the glass, but out of the darkness below a figure appeared, striding up the curved staircase. The man was stocky and dark, dressed in a dark double-breasted suit that strained to cover his wide shoulders. He advanced with unmistakable authority on squat, powerful legs. He was speaking on his cell phone, but finished the call as he arrived. He motioned for Langdon to enter. "I am Bezu Fausch," he announced, as Langdon pushed through the revolving door, "captain of the Central Directorate of Judicial Police." His tone was fitting, a guttural rumble like a gathering storm. Langdon held out his hand to shake. "Robert Langdon." Fausch's enormous palm wrapped around Langdon's with crushing force. "I saw the photo," Langdon said. "Your agent said Jacques Saunier himself did that?" "Mr. Langdon," Fausch's ebony eyes locked on, "what you see in the photo is only the beginning of what Saunier did." So I will stop